that features the people who are actually doing that work. So Joran, take it away.
The Buck Institute is interested in understanding aging, not only to make us live longer, but to actually alleviate and suppress the development of diseases.
Chronic disease is the great health challenge of our time. Aging is the main driver of chronic disease. To eliminate chronic disease, we must harness the biology of aging so we can live healthy longer. The Buck Institute is the world's first research organization dedicated solely to the biology of aging. We work with the building blocks of biology to understand how we age.
The Buck is concentrating on really trying to go to the root of the problem, so understanding that we can sort of intervene really early.
The Buck Institute is probably the best place in the world to be working on aging because there's so many different aspects of aging that are being studied. It's key because no one lab can do it all.
Our scientific explorers are brilliant, curious, and committed.
The idea that you could actually develop drugs that slow down the aging process was really something that 20 or 30 years ago people thought this cannot be done. Not only can it be done, but we will do it.
The pieces are in place. And we are in a unique position to put them together. Our world is defined by paradigm shifts, created by scientific discoveries. The biology of aging is the next frontier.
We're working toward a world where healthcare is better. It's a world where if we can eradicate the aging component to disease, we're all going to live healthier and longer.
It's just an incredible vision that really will, surpass anything else that we've ever seen before.
We are inviting you to a future of aging without illness. It's happening today, and it's happening here. Join us.
Before I welcome Brianna up to the stage, I want to thank our generous sponsors. They are listed in your program. If it makes sense to you, please use their businesses because we really appreciate their support. So I want to make sure you all have note cards for questions and answers. You can write something down whenever you want to. Just raise your hand and one of our volunteers, thanks to them for helping out today, will be around to pick those up and get them up to me. And also, a special welcome to those of you on Zoom. I'm looking at the camera. You too can participate. You can ask questions in the chat feature, and somebody will get them up to me here on this stage. So, it is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Brianna Stubbs. She is an assistant research professor. She co-directs our clinical research core, and she's also the director of translational science. 3 titles, 1 person, she's busy. You can read about Brianna's educational background in your program. Personally, I have always been impressed that she got her PhD from Oxford. She is the perfect person to drive our efforts to translate Buck research into products and drugs that you can use. Brianna, come on up. Whoops. That's your seat. So before we get started, I need to remind everybody, Brianna is a PhD. She's not an MD. So please, no medical advice questions would be really great. And always, before you do anything based on information that you hear today, talk to your doctor. So there you go. And can everybody hear me okay?
And
All right.
Can everybody hear me okay? Yes, good.
Okay, if there's a problem, let us know and we'll get the sound turned up. Okay, so Brianna, let's get going. So, before we get into the specifics of our clinical research programs, what's the overarching goal?
I mean, there's several overarching goals. As you saw in the video just a second ago, the Buck has a long history of being world-class at basic science research, and all of my colleagues here at the Buck have, storied, long careers, really understanding the molecular mechanisms of aging. With recent shifts in the number of things that we can measure, wearable technology and other things, other innovations in the last 5-10 years, it's all of a sudden become possible to understand aging in people better than we have done in the past, in a lot more granular detail, and we'll talk about some of the studies that we're doing that address that. But also, just using people as a model, translating the work that we do here. We have a lot of collaborations with other faculty who come up with ideas in mice or in flies or in cells, and then making that bridging step into people. So really one of our key goals in the clinical unit is to bridge Buck science into people. And ultimately, you all are who I think about every day when I come to work. I want to be able to stand up here and you want to know what you can do now to age better, and I want to be able to give you science-backed answers for that. And that's really been a driving force in establishing the clinical research unit. And and as you can see on the slide here, kind of think about this in two ways. It's can we increase health span, and health span is the years of healthy life. So I don't think anyone here is interested in living to 150 if you spend 50 years with compromised cognitive or physical function. So really, before we live longer, we need to understand how to live better for as long as possible. So extending health span, pushing off the time before which we become frail or have cognitive decline. But also just, as we age, we get less resilient. And that's kind of a slightly different flavor of the same concept. But, if you have a surgery, if you have a fall, if you get an infection like COVID, some kind of stress to your body, our ability to respond to those stresses diminish as we age. And you can kind of see the idea here of, function goes down, but in a young person, function will come back up again. And generally with age, we're less resilient, less able to bounce back. And so those are kind of two related concepts that are kind of like what we're thinking about here in terms of extending healthy, helping people age better.
So before we get into the clinical trial specifics, I want you to know that we are recording this event. You will get a follow-up email with a link to the video, along with some backup information. So take notes if you want to, but you don't need to. We've got you covered here.
And hopefully after this talk,
Yes.
A number of my team will be outside. We've built a really fantastic team. Everyone's really, really passionate about what we do, and they'll do their best to answer any questions about the research studies that we're running. So go see them afterwards.
So I think the last time you and I did a session here, Brianna, was in the fall, and I looked back at the slides then, and there were about 3 really active clinical trials. Seems like things have exploded.
Yeah, it's been a fantastic season of exponential growth that I think everyone in the Institute here is really excited about. A lot of that, as I mentioned, has come from collaborations with other faculty, new faculty joining the Buck, and next session is one of my colleagues, Dr. James Yurkovich, who recently joined the Buck, and he and I are collaborating on a couple of these studies. So, really having the ability to apply our knowledge and basic science in clinical research has been, a terrific area of growth. We still have some studies which we'll talk about, which are kind of our bread and butter themes and how we got going. But now we're starting to look at new and exciting ways to expand the areas that we're focusing on. And you and I are going to talk through some of those now. But yeah, it's been a busy time, but also it's been like the way I think about it myself is I'm kind of on the side of one of Elon Musk's rockets about to be shot into space, and I just got to hold on as tight as possible because it's taking off, and so we're just really trying to ride the rocket.
And my office is right down the hall from Brianna's, the clinical research team. They're busy, they're great. They're a great addition to the Buck. It's really exciting.
And a number of new people joined the team. The team, since we spoke last, is at least 100% bigger, doubled in size. So, we're doing a lot of exciting things.
So let's start going through clinical trials. First one up is something called beta. What is that? Who are you looking for?
So we all know that diabetes is an increasing problem in Western society, in American society, but it's hard to predict where someone is on their journey towards diabetes, and it's hard to really kind of to say with any certainty until someone reaches the point of no return. And so using continuous glucose monitors, as you can see in the picture here, we're collaborating with Phenome Health and another research organization called For You and Me. They're really experts in big data. And so what we're trying to do is use non-invasive technologies like continuous glucose monitors. So the idea would be you could get something in the mail, it's really small, you apply it to your arm, it connects to your phone, you don't have to go into the doctor's, and using just that remote wearable data, we could say where you are in your journey towards diabetes, and then hopefully intervene earlier to stop it. So really, the study is kind of fun. People who are in the study have to do stress tests at home. So we've been working on having people sing to us via Zoom. I tried to get one of my team to do it in lab meeting the other day. She's got kids, and I was trying to get her to pick her favorite Disney song. But it's actually kind of stressful to sing in front of people that you don't know. So that's one of our stress challenges. See if that affects people's glucose metabolism. People will have meal challenges, and then they'll be coming to the buck, and we'll be doing comparing all of that data we collect at home with gold standard in-clinic test, which tells us about your diabetes progression, which is called an oral glucose tolerance test. So it's really marrying the wearable data and the at-home challenges with the clinical gold standard to reverse or slow progression into diabetes.
Who are you looking for as far as folks who might be interested in this trial?
So we're doing this study in 3 phases. The first phase is focusing on people with type 1 diabetes, which is less common in the population. The reason for doing that is that they don't have any of their own secretion of the hormone insulin. That's the reason people get type 1 diabetes. And so by taking that out of the equation, they're kind of a simpler place to start. But we'll go type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and we're also doing in healthy people as well. So that will be rolling out over the next 2 years or so.
Great. The big study.
So this has been a really fun collaboration with, it's sort of an open service to all Buck faculty. So the professors can approach us and say, we need blood samples from young people and older people, for example, to look at differences in their immune cells. Like right now, that's what we're working on. So the idea is that we collect blood samples from people like yourself, just blood sample, medical history, some very light information. This is just one study visit where you come in, we collect that information, we do some basic physical testing, cognitive testing, and then we provide those blood samples, anonymized obviously, but with a bit more data about you to the scientists. So it's a way to give our scientists access to samples and data at the same time, which is a lot more than they would normally get if they went to a blood bank, which is often how people will do this kind of thing. Give them a lot more information and do it quickly. So it's a service that we provide to the Institute.
Is there, so anybody in this room can qualify for this one?
Yes, but we are again also recruiting that in kind of waves, and right now we're looking for under 40 and over 60. So a few of you might be eligible.
All right, okay.
You all look great.
Talk about GRACE.
So this is another collaborative effort, and you can see how all of these projects start to sort of stack up in our workflow. GRACE stands for glycation reduction in aging and clinical evaluation. This really comes from some very elegant observations from Dr. Pankaj Kapahi's lab. He's got a long history of studying how sugar, again, related to diabetes, but how sugar affects our health and affects our aging. And he saw in his mouse model where he removed the ovaries from female mice to sort of induce menopause, and he saw improvement in hormonal function, attenuated weight gain. Like generally, mice, if you could treat their sugar stress and reduce it, they would do better in this sort of post-menopause model. And so we're now trying to replicate that in people. We're obviously not taking people's ovaries out, but we are recruiting post-menopausal women. You have to have like a slightly higher metabolic risk. So you have to have a slightly higher BMI. You have to have a slightly higher hemoglobin A1C, which is a risk factor for diabetes. So there's a few more criteria because we're kind of trying to look for people who are just, again, a little at risk of developing metabolic syndrome, and we're looking to see if lowering sugar stress using a supplement that Dr. Kapahi developed. So it's a combination of things that you could probably get at a health store now, and he's put it all together in one pill. He's found that it works in animals to improve health, and now we're studying it in people.
The time study.
So I won't talk for too long about this because James Yerkovich in the next session, I'm sure, will talk about this in a lot of detail. But as I mentioned in the introduction, we can now measure an order of magnitude more things than we could 5 or even 10 or even 5 years ago. The amount of data we can collect about people has gone up very, very rapidly. The amount of new technologies is a lot more. And in science, we have all of these things that we call omics, so metabolomics, lipid omics, transcript omics. It's a fancy way of saying we can measure 10,000 things all to do with the metabolism in the body. We can measure 10,000 things all to do with the lipids in the body. Like, we can measure so much stuff about every system just with a single sample of blood, but there's no framework or gold standard for interpreting that. These techniques are so new that we don't know how it might be different in someone from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Whether they're just natural variations in all of these big data sets. And so the time study is really aiming to map the changes within a day and across several weeks and several months in all of these tens of thousands of things. And it's going to be complemented by people wearing, people are going to be sort of like cyborgs. One of my colleagues says that these people will be the most studied people ever in the history, because you'll be wearing, like I am here, like a little Oura ring. This is tracking my sleep. This is tracking my heart rate all of the time. I'm sure it's saying that I'm all kind of stressed with all of you looking at me right now. Yeah, the Oura ring tells you an awful lot about how you're functioning day to day, but we'll also be wearing a wrist band that's measuring complementary data, continuous glucose monitors again. So you'll be walking around, every little detail will be being measured for the 10 super intense weeks of the study, really to try and also, hopefully we'll see some things in the non-invasive data, in the ring, in the wearable, and the CGM that tell us, that map onto the stuff we get from the blood as well. So there's an awful lot of things being measured in time. It's very hypothesis free. So I don't really know what we're going to find, but it's meant to be a resource for other scientists who are starting to use these new technologies and make progress towards understanding how to implement this in aging.
So I encourage you, that's next month. I had a pre-interview with James. This stuff is really cool. I mean, people who are going to enroll in this trial are real pioneers.
We call them the time travelers. The
time travelers. James thinks that they are, with the exception perhaps of astronauts, these are going to be the most, quote, characterized people on the planet. So if you are interested in being among them, you can talk to folks outside and come next month and hear James describe his work.
It is an intense study, though. You're here every week for 11 weeks. There's a few days where you're here with us for 12 hours as we take all of these measures. There's brain tests, there's physical tests, there's swabs that go everywhere. there's poop samples. Like every flip. There was one point we took it out, but it might come back in the future. We were talking about hair, like every bit of you that we can sample, we will be sampling. So you have to have some free time and be very, very tolerant of prodding and poking.
But there is, well, for most of these, but there's a financial remuneration. Mm-hmm. So yes.
And with the time study, obviously, you'll also have access to all of the information from the wearables for free during the duration of the study. And we do our best. We can't provide everyone with everything live as you go through the study, but we are as intentional as possible about giving you back things that are interesting. But
be here next month. Okay, let's talk about the MOVE study.
So MOVE stands for Molecular Optimization via Exercise. You can see there's a theme. We always have to have a catchy acronym that somehow relates to the study. This is another collaboration with Dr. Simon Melov, he's one of the world experts in muscle aging. A fun fact about Simon is that he's running a study right now on whale muscle, and of a week he might be like down in Monterey Bay with his little ice box bringing whale muscle back up. So he's doing some really cool stuff, and so we're working together to understand how our exercise habits drive our aging. We all know that exercise is good for us. We all know that people who exercise more tend to live longer and tend to have better function, but kind of surprisingly, no one has ever looked to see if a lot of exercise actually reverses aging on a cellular level. And actually, there's people who think that maybe too much exercise might actually be bad for aging. And so in this study, we're recruiting a super extreme athlete cohort, and we've recently finished enrolling our athletes. We had people who run 100 miles, people who bike across the US, people who are US national champions and record holders. I'm an athlete myself. Actually surprised. Usually during the intro, my athletic interests get touted, but I'm an ultra runner, Ironman triathlete, world champion rower. So, personally very interested in the results of this study. But it was very, very inspiring to meet these people and see how they've continued to sort of set themselves goals and challenges and perform as they've aged. But so we finished with those people. We want to compare them to people who are really well, people who are healthy, but people who have never or don't really do structured exercise training. So people who garden, people who walk their dog, people who are in good shape.
People who play bocce ball.
I actually think a lot about my mum when I do this. She was recently here visiting, and she's like, I can do everything that I want to do, but she just, doesn't love to sweat like I do. So we're moving into the phase where we're looking for those folks who are really well but not training. And the idea will be, potentially we find that there's, actually a detrimental effect of too much exercise, who knows, but we are, this study would involve riding on the bike, but we also do a procedure called a muscle biopsy. So we collect samples of the muscle, we can take it upstairs, and it sits next to Simon's whale muscle, and we can grow it in a dish. We can make it contract, we can train it exactly like it would be exercise training in the leg. We can see what the muscle is releasing. We can get deeper than anyone has ever been before in muscle aging. It's what's fantastic, and I think this project is a really wonderful example of basic science and clinical science coming together at the Buck, because we collect the sample just on the rooms as you've passed on your way in, and it goes up a few flights to Simon's lab, it goes across to one of the other buildings to Ákos Gerence's lab, and we're measuring mitochondrial function, we're culturing the cells, we're getting so many measurements that we can only get from live tissue that comes fresh out of our study participants. If these things are frozen, it doesn't work. So it has to come fresh. And so this has never been able to be done at the Buck before. And so it's not been possible to leverage Simon and Ákos's fantastic technologies in this way before. So it's been really exciting collaboration. And you can see here, at the bottom, there's not very much difference in the muscle cross-section and how it looks in a 70-year-old athlete compared with a 40-year-old athlete, which is at the top. And you can see that people who don't exercise, they lose muscle mass and they gain fat mass. And so, but this is known. What we don't know is if I take the cells out and I look at all of those hallmarks of aging, which you might have seen covered in our course, or other people talk about inflammation, oxidative stress, cellular senescence, how well are those cells aging? That has never been done before. This has only ever been done at this kind of surface level, superficial, more superficial level of detail. So this is the first time that anyone's ever taken an aging biology approach to how exercise affects aging, and on a molecular level, not just you live longer or you maintain independence for longer. So I'm excited about the results and have friendly bets with a few people as to what the outcomes will be.
So is one of the potential outcomes of this is to find targets?
Absolutely.
Of so what happens in the healthy elite athletes? That might be turned into a drug that would help folks who maybe are not, for whatever reason, are not able to exercise?
Can't or don't want to, yeah, absolutely. And that would be a really important outcome. And not only will we be able to do that by looking to see what's upregulated, what's downregulated, where might those targets be, but once we have the muscle cells, the live muscle cells grown in cell culture, we can actually make like a system that allows us to apply drugs to the live muscle cells and actually see in muscles from these individuals if it helps with function or if it helps with growth. So having this live tissue is super exciting. Not only is it a way to discover targets, but it's also a way to test possible drugs quickly, very cost effectively, kind of screen out candidates before we would maybe like look at moving something into an animal or a clinical trial.
The STAK study.
STAK stands for Strategies to Augment Ketosis. So those of you who have heard me talk a little bit before know that one of my research interests since I did my PhD is ketone bodies, and I think we have some slides and we'll talk about that. We don't need to go there just yet, but one thing that I've always tried to do in my career is answer foundational questions. STAK is trying to answer, should we personalize dosing of ketone drinks for younger versus older people, or people who are metabolically very healthy versus people who might be a little bit metabolically less healthy? So this is, very foundational for us to understand how to use ketone drinks in other studies, and other research is doing this too. So this is a very straightforward study. People come in for a kind of a screening intake visit, and then there's one test day, and we do a little bit like the oral glucose tolerance tests I was talking about earlier. We do an oral ketone tolerance test. So you drink a drink, we take some blood, and we're doing this with 400 people, and the idea is to find out whether older versus younger people respond differently, if we need to change how we dose, and also if people with diabetes or pre-diabetes respond differently to healthy people. So it's a foundational study that's enabling other work and enabling more translation of ketone drinks.
And this is a short study, right?
One test visit.
Just show up once. So there you go.
Well, it's a screening visit and then a test visit.
Got
so
it.
Show up twice. But
So all the other studies we're going to talk about from this point on, including STAK, do involve the science of ketone bodies. So, whoops.
Maybe, yeah, we'll go there and then we'll go back.
Yeah, we'll go back. Okay, so talk about what's the ketone body science.
Okay, raise your hand if you've heard of the keto diet. Many people. Okay, so when you're on the keto diet, it's a low carb diet. You will typically, an apple would be too many carbs if you're on a ketogenic diet. And the idea is to get your body to take its fat stores, and you can see the fat in the little yellow blobs up the top there. The fat goes to the liver, and the liver turns the fat into ketones. Ketones then circulate around in our blood, and mainly they act as an energy source. They're really, really well used in our brains. We actually evolved ketones so that our brains could keep working in times when we were like roaming the plains and between us being able to find food. So mainly ketones are an energy, really good fuel for the brain, also a very good fuel for the heart. Those are two big ketone using organs. But an important innovation that was actually made by two scientists at the Buck, Eric Verdin and John Newman. They were actually at Gladstone at the time, but now working here. They were the first people to discover that ketones were actually behaving a little bit like a drug in some ways. They were activating these anti-aging pathways, some of the things that I've mentioned before, so inflammation, oxidative stress, cell senescence, and that ketones weren't just being burnt up and used to keep the brain going, they were actually affecting cells in ways that made the cells age better. And so this has really opened up a whole field of research, us and others who are researching ketones for healthy aging. We're really focused on what I'll call like non-specific geriatric syndromes. So we're not looking, there is whole research groups looking at cognitive decline. There are whole research groups looking at heart failure. Those are two very active areas that are researching ketones. But we're kind of interested in, we're interested in frailty. Frailty involves muscle function. It involves inflammation. It's very complicated. But we think that because ketones not only act as an energy for some of the systems that are kind of stressed during frailty, they're also acting as a signal as well. Because they sort of touch on multiple pathways, we think they might be a very powerful intervention. And you can see here muscle catabolism, the metabolism of glucose, and inflammation being two kind of key areas where we think that ketones could be helpful. So that's one of the things that we're testing in our studies now.
And so then here at the Buck, there's a supplement, right? A liquid supplement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually when I joined the Buck just over 6 years ago, I joined the Buck to help help a company to be the scientist bridging between the buck scientists and the company to develop a drink which is now on sale. The company is called Ketone, Kitone. I have to spell it because it's kind of confusing because it sounds like ketone with a K. But they make this supplement that contains like a precursor to ketones, and you eat it, and it's almost like you had been on a ketogenic diet for a long time, or like you'd been doing a fast. So what I'm interested in is how many of the benefits of a ketogenic diet can we get with just a drink. So you don't need to change your diet, you don't need to be on keto, you don't need to fast. You can take this drink and it'll be like you'd been doing those things, and we're interested in how that could impact frailty.
So let's go back. We're going to talk about TAKEOFF. And I got a question. Are there any studies enrolling participants over the age of 80? So talk about TAKEOFF.
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to remember. So as you see, we have many studies going on right now, and they all have very slightly different lower and upper cutoffs. I know that time doesn't have an upper limit, and that was really intentional. I don't think that TAKEOFF has an upper limit, but I don't want to give you false information. So TAKEOFF possibly. STAK has an upper limit of 70. Yeah, I'm like, this is a pop quiz I was not ready for. Sorry, but do contact us or find the team. We'll double check those things. TAKEOFF is really testing that idea we just talked about, that drinking a ketone drink might help with muscle function, cognitive function, and general energy in people who are just starting to slow down. So we're looking for what we call like the Goldilocks spot. We don't want people who I can tell who's going to be eligible by the way that they walk through our door. If they charge through the door and they're in the room and they're too well. If they come in and maybe they have they're really slow and they have a walker and it takes, I'm holding the door for them for like 30 seconds while they come through, then they might be too slow. And we're kind of looking for people who are at risk, who we think we might be able to help, aren't so far slowed down that, that it'd be harder to help them, but it's also really hard to make well people better. So we've kind of got this very specific walking speed that we look for people who are at risk. It's the kind of questions we ask people. It's like, do you need to take a break after you've gone up 2 or 3 flights of stairs? Do you need a break after you've walked 2 or 3 blocks? And if the answer is yes, then you'd likely be a good fit for TAKEOFF. The reason for that, as I said, is because we want people who we think we can make a meaningful impact on. This study, it lasts 20 weeks, so it's a big commitment. You would be taking ketone drinks every day. You come in for that intake visit and then baseline testing, progress through the study, and you come in at 1 month and 3 months, and then again at the 5-month mark. So multiple visits and taking this supplement every single day during that study. So again, we appreciate all of the enthusiasm, but these studies do involve commitment, and you become a partner in the science and the research if you decide to participate. So don't take it on lightly, and we do our best to talk through everything during a consent process and answer any questions. But no obligation and to participate, and only do it if you're ready to commit, because these are marathons, not sprints. Some of these studies.
Is there anybody in the audience who's taken part in any of our clinical trials?
I can see some of you.
All
some of
right.
my friends, yeah.
Was it a good experience? Yeah. Cool. All right.
It's better now. It's better now.
That first ketone drink,
Yeah.
Not good at all.
No, they're so much better. You can't say that. She's got to take that back. They don't taste bad
the
anymore.
new ones are good.
Yeah.
The first ones were a little scary.
Yeah.
So TAKEOFF is the first study that really focuses on function, right, in older adults?
Well,
Specific?
TAKEOFF is exciting for a number of different reasons. For us, as you just said, it's exciting because we're combining the Buck's expertise in biology. We're going to be doing a lot of deep immunophenotyping, a lot of analysis of all of the samples to try and understand those molecular mechanisms. Look if we can see changes in the muscle, mitochondria, those things that we saw in the previous slide. So the biology, the beating heart of our mission here in the biology, it's very, very central to TAKEOFF. But the primary outcome of the study is function. I don't know, I wouldn't care if my blood sample looked a bit better if I still couldn't walk up those 2 flights of stairs. You know, what we want is to be seeing changes in people's ability to enjoy their lives. And I think what we're starting to see as a field, and what we hope to see with this study, is that there are some interventions that just make people seem more well. And there's a number of drugs on the market now, GLP-1s, which you've probably heard of, are like a possible candidate for this, that could be a subject of a future study. Metformin is another candidate. Lots of drugs that relate to metabolism and therefore are kind of close to the idea of what we're doing here with ketones. But people go on these drugs and they just kind of do better. And so the outcome for TAKEOFF is designed to capture physical function, cognitive function, how well you feel, and endurance as well, sort of strength and endurance at the same time. So rather than pick one thing, we're trying to look at function as a whole. And that's a theme of where our whole research program and really the field of geroscience, clinical geroscience, so clinical studies of aging, we really think that that's where the field is going as a whole, because it isn't just about improving one molecular marker or even improving one functional domain in isolation. We really want to, and it makes sense, right? You remember that video at the start? Aging is driven by a whole load of different things, and if we target aging, it's like at ground zero. So if we target those molecular mechanisms, we actually have a good chance of improving multiple different age-related syndromes. And so that's the bet that we're making with this, and we're seeing other people kind of double down on this idea too.
So I think this question, I'm going to assume that it's related to results. Why do we never hear about what you are doing? How long does it take?
Oh man.
You know, like what's the...
So we do have results evenings. We've had 2 of them so far where people who participate can come and hear about the results. We do try and share anyone who's on our interest list, which is a no obligation. You know, if you're interested in the clinical work, we do try and share those results. But really, these studies just take so long. TAKEOFF will be enrolling for 18 months. The bike study, we were enrolling for about a year. I have a paper that I submitted in January with results from the bike study. So that was submitted a year after the study finished. The reason for that was that I have 5 papers from that study, and I kind of, you know, like I can only write so many at once. And but I had one that went in January. It's now July, and we're still in revisions with the journal. So we're, you know, science publishing and how the challenges of that is a different conversation, but setting up a study can take months. We put a lot of thought into our research protocols. We have to train all of our staff. There's an awful lot of logistics that go on, very complicated. Running the study, like you might participate, you might be participant number 1, but if I need 150 people, then I just can't start everyone at once because we can only run X number of visits in a week. So enrollment takes some time. And then you finish the last person, a person 150, we gather a breath, and then we have this mountain of data, which we kind of have to look at in the order, in some, we have to pick an order of priority. So the bike study has, like I think about 4 accepted publications with a 5th and a 6th in the pipeline. And it just takes time. So we do our best. I would love to do a better job. So, you know, if people want to hear more, we can do our best, but be patient with us because it's a slow process.
So you mentioned the bike study. That study's closed. That was the first study here at the Buck that involved the ketones. What are you able to tell us so far from that?
As I said, we have 5 publications. So the first one, the key aim of the bike study was to show that it was safe and tolerable for people to take ketones. So we found that it was. We did a whole bunch of questionnaires around tolerance of the product. We looked at people's labs and people's vital signs and everything to indicate whether or not it was safe, and it was safe. That was publication number 1. Number 2 was we looked at how people's blood ketones changed in the short term with 2 different types of the drink, with a beverage and a powder, and that helps us design dosing and select powder or beverage for future studies. That was number 2. We have our well, I guess one of them was a protocol paper, so I'm just trying to count as I go. We have our clinical outcomes paper, so our looking at if people's cognitive and physical function changed. There were some individuals where it did get better. There was a few things where there was a little bit of signal, but it was a very small study that was designed mainly for safety and tolerance, so I can't say anything conclusively there. I would say that, there's still some promise there, otherwise we wouldn't be pursuing this. That would be like area number 3, and then area number 4 is all of our biomarkers. So we collected blood, we collected stool, we collected urine. The stool samples will likely be in its whole own paper, because we did see big changes in the gut microbiome, and we're collaborating with UCSF to test that more in mice, and we're writing more grants with them to follow up. But until you have a paper published, it's very hard to share results. So that's one piece. And then our biomarker blood samples, we did see, again, small study, but there were 3 or 4 people who came into the study super inflamed and kind of accelerated aging in their blood, and those people had a very big improvement in all of those markers across the study. So again, very promising signal. We're working on integrating all of that now with other collaborators, but those are still in process. And that study started in January 23, I guess, 23 to 24. So this is just how long it takes.
So I got to go back to. Joran, can you take me back to the beginning? I'm looking for the XPRIZE slide.
Oh yeah, where did that go?
There we go. All right, thank you. So, the XPRIZE competition. This is really cool. There was a good few days of celebration here at the Buck. So we are semifinalists. Brianna's project, semifinalists. It's a big deal. What's the XPRIZE?
So, I think one thing I want you to walk away from this with is that anti-aging or treating aging isn't science fiction anymore. This is science fact. There are big efforts like the XPRIZE that will hopefully have an answer within the next 5 to 10 years to this challenge of the aim that you will win the XPRIZE if you can show that you can reverse aging by 10 years in muscle, cognitive, and immune function with a 1-year treatment. And this, we went to the semi-final award ceremony, and there are companies there are clinics there are other academic institutions there. There's a lot of buzz and a lot of people who think that they can do this. So it's a very, very exciting time. The XPRIZE generating all of this coverage has facilitated a lot of conversation about what does success even look like, because one of our biggest challenges has been, well, how do I say that for sure that someone has aged backwards 10 years? So it's brought a lot of experts together to discuss the judging criteria, driving consensus, but it's also driven a lot of financial investment into the companies working on it, and hopefully also into academic institutions like us as well.
So it's $101 million.
It's $101 million because they had a $100 million prize previously, and the donor wanted it to be the biggest ever. So he threw in the extra million just so that he could have the biggest prize.
So, how many teams are currently in the XPRIZE?
So over 300 applied, I believe, and we're down to sort of 40 semifinalists. So
out of 300, we're among the top 40. So kudos to you, kudos to us. Yeah, I know.
Thank you.
So what does our XPRIZE project look like?
So we're collaborating with IHU Toulouse, who are world experts in a concept called intrinsic capacity, which I know we have a slide about, and maybe we'll flip to that in a minute. But it's a really wonderful powerhouse collaboration. They have really tapped into the power of the French healthcare system, and they can enroll people directly from their medical practice into their clinical trials. They're working with the WHO on this idea of getting a diagnostic code for healthy aging. Because right now, if you went to a doctor and you wanted them to prescribe you metformin, it's going to be for diabetes, or everything that's prescribed is for a disease, not just for kind of aging generally. And so the idea that Toulouse have been developing and have had success with the WHO is this idea of intrinsic capacity. And so we'll talk about that, but our idea is that we're going to do a very intense lifestyle intervention. So ours is not a new sexy drug. We are going to be using the ketones, we are going to be using various other supplements, but people will be cosseted and encouraged to absolutely optimize every element of lifestyle. And we think that that would achieve the age reduction. So we're, a very, I don't know, what your grandma told you, like style type team, rather than a cryotherapy, we're going to freeze the body. And it's not super futuristic. It's really grounded in what we know to work. And supplementing that with data from digital wearables, and kind of like the best-in-class support for the lifestyle intervention to personalize it. And
we also, the Furman lab here developed a clock, right?
Yes. So again, in collaboration with Toulouse, David Furman is also an expert in this idea of intrinsic capacity, and using a blood sample and an intrinsic capacity score, he can predict health outcomes related to frailty and kind of progression to disease. So David's also a member of the team.
So we're going to talk about intrinsic capacity. I want to put a plug for our September seminar with Dr. John Newman, who's going to be talking about learning how to be your own geriatrician. I'm sure we're going to cover this too. This is, I'm excited about it, the focus on intrinsic capacity, because I actually think it's stuff that we all care about. Mm-hmm.
And not just, I guess, another endorsement of this as an idea is that we just this week submitted a nearly $50 million grant application that was, in the current climates, federally funded, that focuses on developing an at-home measure for intrinsic capacity and approving drugs for intrinsic capacity. So the US government is getting behind this idea as well. And as Chris said, I think that because it's a concept that focuses on function, we should all be excited about it too. So as I mentioned, the WHO have already endorsed this idea that intrinsic capacity should have a diagnostic code. Intrinsic capacity includes our cognitive function, it includes our ability to move around, our locomotion, it includes sensory function, eyes and ears, it includes psychological status, how our mood is, how connected we are, and it includes vitality as well. And that's really the stuff that we get at with the blood samples. So nutritional statuses, mineral deficiencies, level of inflammation, and as you mentioned, Dr. Furman's blood test and combining it with some functional scores can do a really excellent job. So if you came into the clinic, we could do a test for each one of these things. The idea would be you could do it in 20, 30 minutes and a blood test, and we'd be able to say, oh, okay, Chris, your risk of developing disability in 10 years is X. The idea is that we would have intrinsic capacity would be a bit like a growth chart for aging. So you go to a pediatrician, your baby is the 20th percentile, you need to work on this, or vice versa, on the 90th percentile, you kind of want to know your trajectory. And so we already know quite a lot about intrinsic capacity and how it's really high when we're young. All of those systems are working really well. And then in middle and later life, we start to kind of drop off. And, maybe it's something as simple as you start to get less good hearing, but everything else is good. But that does represent a meaningful decline in your quality of life. And so what we hope to do, and what this government funding agency hopes to do, and what we hope to do with our XPRIZE function. And it is building on what I talked about with TAKEOFF, where we're looking at multiple domains. But what we're trying to do is marry biology, which is important, because you can't escape biology, with function, and tying those two things together, and not just one piece of function across all of the domains that are important to us in how we age now. And so, yes, this is intrinsic capacity is an important feature of our XPRIZE, improving intrinsic capacity. Intrinsic capacity is a big focus of this grant that we just put in. And, if we don't win it, someone else will. So I think that this is a theme that I see in the field, and something that will, potentially in the next 5-10 years be something that every doctor could assess, or with this grant, that you could have a kit mailed out to you at home and you could test it yourself.
So just another shout out to the buck. So just so you get this, so right now in this country, the FDA does not have any means of recognizing aging as something that a drug could be prescribed for. Intrinsic capacity, if the FDA accepts it,
and the WHO have, so it's likely that they might.
So it opens the door to a lot of great things. And I'm very proud personally of the Buck that we were early to the game. John Newman was early to the game. We've been pushing this and pushing efforts to get the FDA to change their tune and to allow this research to go forward in this country. So kudos to the team here. So what are the possibilities for clinical trials here at the Buck that would feed into the XPRIZE?
So at the moment, the XPRIZE could only be funded through donations. So we're actively fundraising this morning even in partnership with Brian Van Weel and his team and other leadership here at the Buck so that we can participate in the XPRIZE as a clinical site and enroll some of you lovely people as well. So it's not confirmed that we can do that yet. If we can't do it, the trial will be run just in France and we'll provide our services, advice, do analysis and be partners, but not enrolling. So assuming that we were able to do it, we would be providing this intense supervised intervention focusing on each area of intrinsic capacity. So you'd have personal training for endurance and strength. You'd have consultations with a dietitian. You'd have reviews with a doctor or nurse to look and see if you're on any risky medications. You'd have a review of your eye and ear prescriptions, things like that. It would be very, very, we would want you exactly as you are at baseline. Don't come to us too healthy. And again, a bit like TAKEOFF, there'll be kind of a sweet spot of people who are eligible. Definitely going to have some risk factors. And then we will optimize all of those things possible, lifestyle, supplements. At this point, it's still very much on the table that we might include one of those gerotherapeutic drugs that we've talked about, and I would be very excited to do that. That's still up for discussion. Right now, Toulouse is just about to start doing the pilot study, the semi-final study, and all going well, we would start that next research next summer.
So we have people here from philanthropy. Raise your hand there, Brian, at the back. Anybody who wants to talk about supporting this, he's the guy to talk to afterwards. So I did get a question, which I think is apropos at the moment. How will government fundraising cuts impact your research?
She emailed me last night. She was like, you got to have an answer ready for that question.
Yes. So what's happening in the time of Trump?
I am not going to lie to you all. It's been pretty rough. It's been pretty rough. There's been a lot of uncertainty. I've been at the Buck for 6 years, and the uncertainty in the mood now is unlike anything that I've ever seen. We and colleagues have had funding paused, funding taken away that was already awarded, slow review of grants, and a lot of uncertainty around how we support the organization that surrounds the science and keeps the science running. So, I'm happy to talk in more detail about that. But I think, summarize to say it's been really hard, and it's only been possible because I think that everyone who works here on the science side and the admin side just really believes in this mission. And I think that's key. Even people who are on the admin side think that what we do here is important, and they're not an accountant here because it's any different to being an accountant at some, like a homeware company or whatever. They're an accountant here because they think that we're working on an important problem. And I think that collective mission has been one of the most important things in getting us through. But things are changing all of the time. We had new news this week. The bill that's going through the Senate right now would have huge impacts for us, continuing to have impacts on staffing and the research that we can do here. So we still believe in the mission. We're moving things forward as much as we can. I feel very fortunate that that we've been very well funded and are still able to work on all these projects. But I definitely had a reminder this week that can't take anything for granted. So call your senators. It's a little demoralizing.
Got it.
And only worth it because I really believe we're working on an important problem where we're going to make a difference.
Got a couple questions here. How about a study of drugs, metformin, human growth hormone, rapamycin?
Absolutely. So as you see, we've grown a lot in the last year. We went from 3 to 6 studies. It's very, very much and kind of imminently on our roadmap to start looking at repurposed drugs. In fact, as part of this recent grant application, one part of that, which was actually didn't go in the end, but like it was focused on repurposing drugs. So it's something where if we can secure funding, which, as per the previous question, is not certain. If we can secure funding, then absolutely we would love to do that. We have needed to build a lot of infrastructure. So to go from no clinical research to the point where you can give someone a drug, it's a lot of growth. We've brought on doctors to our team. We now, as of yesterday, I have a full-time nurse. So things are getting into the shape where this is possible. And I'm sure that within the next couple of years, we will be doing that kind of study. I think it's really important, but not yet.
Got it. Okay, let's see. Somebody asked about ketone esters. Do you have any recommendations for affordable ketone esters for those of us on fixed income?
Yeah.
What's available out there?
There's a number of different types of ketones out there. Unfortunately, the ones that actually work just are more expensive. And so I would suggest people who want to experiment buying like a small amount, seeing if it works for you. At the moment, we don't have, the science is still, it works for some people and not others. So if it's something you're interested in, purchase some. As I mentioned, we worked with the company that developed a product called Ketone, spelled with a Q. There are other companies. My first job out of my PhD was also for a similar company. There are options out there. The good ones are expensive, unfortunately. Try it and see if it works for you. And then I often think about ketones probably as more of a as needed boost rather than just because of the expense. It's hard for people to do them every day, apart from if you're in one of our studies, of course. But I hope that as the science gets better, as more people are aware of them, the costs are coming down. For context, when I left my PhD, started working at a company, we would sell a single serving for $30. And now they're more like $4. So it's like a nice smoothie, like a bougie Whole Foods or Erewhon kind of like smoothie, but it's still not, cheap. But it's come down a lot. So watch this space. Maybe soon there'd be more cheaper options.
And we will include a link to the company that we're working with in the follow-up email so that you'll have that. So folks, we are right about at noon. I want to thank Brianna for her time. She is going to She will be around for a while to answer your questions. This girl's going on a really well-deserved vacation tonight, so please don't take up too much of her time because she's got stuff to pull together before she can walk out the door. So, moving on. So once again, a plug for our August 6th event. Registration is now open, so feel free to sign up. When she was talking about nutrition, one of the things James is going to talk about is people in this time trial, they're going to eat prescribed foods, and then they're going to look at what those foods actually do in the body, which just blows me away.
Yeah, even the food participates in the study. Like samples of the meals are getting sent off and getting analyzed. It's, there's going to be lots of data in the time study, but thank you all very much for coming. I always love to see all of you. Thank you all very much for your energy supporting our research. And I think about you all every day when I come to work, so thank you.
So before we go, I would be remiss if I did not make another fundraising pitch for the buck. The guy on the slide here, Dr. James Johnson, was largely responsible for getting our clinical trial program started. He helped fund that first bike study, which was successful, which kind of launched us on our way. So donations, big, small, make a difference. Talk to philanthropy outside. We have a great online course. If you want to learn more about the biology of aging, it's getting great reviews. We've just launched the next series of our popular podcast. We're not getting any younger yet. Brianna is involved in this next series, so if you want to hear her voice again, that's a good place to find it. If you haven't been on a tour, please come on a tour. We have them on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We have a very cool museum exhibit now that kind of gives the history of the buck and the history of research on aging. And you got to keep up with us. So sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media. We appreciate your support and interest in any way we can get it. So I'll be back on August 6th. I hope you're here too. Thank you very much. Have a great day.